Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss the 1994 film of The Crow, starring Brandon Lee, Michael Wincott, Rochelle Davis, Ernie Hudson, Baleen, Sophia Shinas, and Anna Thompson, directed by Alex Proyas. Welcome back after iRobot. Now, I have never seen. I watched them fairly recently, so I'm kind of familiar, but I've never seen them until like earlier this year at best. And and I know of Brandon Lee's tragic death, and Brandon Lee as in Bruce Lee's son, or the Bruce Lee, the Kung Fu Master. But let's see if he does put out a good performance. But I'm kind of a newbie to this series, so let's just get straight into this. Even though I've heard of this movie, I've never seen. I trying to. Anyways, let's just get into it. It's October 30th, which happens to be Devil's Night in Detroit, where we get Sergeant Albrecht, played by Ernie Hudson, in a crime scene showing a crime scene of Shelley Webster, played by Sophia Shinas, and Eric Draven, played by Bruce Lee's son Brandon Lee, as Sergeant Albrecht meets a girl, Shelley, taking care of someone named Sarah Moore, played by Rochelle Davis, as she's led to believe they're both dead. And 1 year later, Sarah brings them flowers in their graveyard at a cemetery. As a crow comes by the graveyard, and Sarah goes to a restaurant and sees Detective Albrecht. And the next thing you know, we get some bad guys breaking some shit as Eric resurrects thanks to the crow. And this movie is all over the fucking place as it's badly shot, and I don't like any of the characters as they're for some reason absolutely terrible. And I forgot to bring up that this was based on a comic book. So how could this get any worse? Eric finds a place to heal in his apartment and thinks about what the fuck happened to him and Shelley as she was raped and killed, as Eric was also killed while the bad guys led by Top Dollar, played by Michael Wincott, whom I reviewed in Jordan Peele's Nope, as well as Alien Resurrection, and I will review him again in the movie Hitchcock, where I get there as, and I'll get there when I get there, as they're hanging out at a bar while Eric becomes a vigilante called The Crow, as he finds the bad motherfuckers in the city of Detroit, starting with a pawn shop owner who acts pretty damn cheap, until Eric goes around blind building after building, and he was reminding me of the Marvel character Daredevil, and the stunts looked rather pretty bad. Eric starts hunting a man named Tintin, and not the adventures of Tintin, but a character named Tintin. And Eric gets his ass handed to him at first, after hearing about the rape of Shelley, and Eric kills Tintin with his own knife, which was absolutely stupid, with Top Dollar hugging Micah, played by Baleen, and I get the impression she was a fucking vampire the entire goddamn movie, as while Sarah walks in a strip club, let's say, where her sister Darla, played by Anna Thompson, having sex with Fun Boy, who doesn't seem fun whatsoever, while Eric gets to the pawn shop where Gideon owns, as he looks for the engagement ring he was going to give Shelley before he was murdered, and Eric blows up the pawn shop as well as burns Gideon and tells Top Dollar a message that Eric Draven is coming for him. And this is a stupid movie with a stupid plot that literally goes nowhere. As director Alex Proyas, after this in iRobot, which I just reviewed, is a hack of a director. A hack. Sergeant Albrecht encounters Eric, and eventually Eric escapes after almost getting arrested by Sergeant Albrecht when he brings him up himself and Shelley to begin with, as T-Bird tells Top Dollar they're under attack by this vigilante, while Sarah rides her skateboard and Eric saves her from almost getting hit by a taxi cab, and he says something familiar to Sarah as she is led to believe Eric is alive, and Eric breaks into the strip club and plays tricks on Fun Boy, while Darla runs out scared, which made me think, oh god, this is so dumb, as this fucking character was reminding me of the Punisher in bad ways, in my opinion, as I was getting that mixed with Daredevil, as I think this story copied those Marvel comic books, because remember, this was a comic book 5 years before it was ever a movie in 1994. So this was a comic book that was invented in 1989 But this is done poorly, as this is poor popcorn. Eric breaks into Sergeant Albrecht's apartment and asks him what happened that night with the death of him and Shelley, as it was Top Dollar's doing to begin with, as he has a meltdown after seeing how he survived but she didn't, and he leaves while Top Dollar talks with Gideon about how Gideon told him about Eric is coming for him, as Top Dollar kills Gideon. And acting in this is so bad. Sarah gets home and looks for listens to Eric's album, while the Crow comes by Sarah's window and flies away rather quickly to find a couple of criminals, as one stays in the car and is told by Eric to drive while after robbing a store and hitting him with the car, but it doesn't kill him, as Eric tells the criminal to drive faster and the cops come after them, as the window is broken and hits a cop car and traps him up with tape in the car, as he was led to believe Eric was dead, but Eric forces him to drive towards the river to his death, and Eric burns with an image of Crow, which was ludicrous to death. Darla comes home and takes care of Sarah by making her breakfast after dissing her the night before with Fun Boy, which was pretty hypocritical, as Sergeant Albrecht talks with a detective who gets him suspended from the force, while Sarah looks for Eric in his hideout at his own apartment that he died in, but is staying there with the white cat they had at one point, and she eventually does find Eric while the criminal acts hysterical about seeing Eric is still alive. And next thing you know, Sergeant Albrecht seeing Sarah with the cat, whilst Eric smashes his guitar, and we move on to a club scene where Top Dollar and Micah have a meeting about getting rid of Eric by killing him, as the editing in this movie is choppy. Like, it almost made me faint to death, and it was making me sleepy. The Crow comes in the room, as does Eric with the bad guys, as they shoot him dead, but he doesn't die, as he kills every single motherfucker in the room except for Top Dollar, Micah, and Grange, played by Candyman himself, Tony Todd. But other than those three, everybody else is dead meat, and the cops come in, but Eric jumps out of the building and jumps like Daredevil from building to building, while Sergeant Albrecht goes after him and helps Eric out, and when they make a stop, Eric runs out of the car as Top Dollar and Micah find a place to hide, while Eric is approached by kids with masks on, and Eric visits the cemetery and sees Sarah and asks her to forgive him for not saying goodbye and gives her a necklace. And I know I'm going to get some shit at this point, as I'm not liking any of this as well as this movie itself, because it's just terrible. Grange captures Sarah on the behalf of Top Dollar, and Micah telling Eric to come after her as he gets to a church, and Grange shoots at the Crow and Top Dollar coming towards Eric, and thinks about giving Sarah to Eric, but instead shoots him down while the Crow is still alive, and Sergeant Albrecht barges in and helps Eric and Sarah out, and he gets briefly stopped by Micah, but the Crow gets her eyeballs popped open, and as that was frightening, and Eric gets to the roof and saves Sarah and fights Top Dollar to the death, as Top Dollar stabs Eric in the back as he confesses he killed Shelley and is proud of it, and Eric gives Top Dollar 3 hours of pain and gets him thrown off the roof and killed, and Sarah helps Sergeant Albrecht, as does Eric, by giving him a cigarette. But he spits it out, and Eric decides to leave as he wants to go to Shelley's graveyard, and the detectives asks Sergeant Albrecht what happened, and he says he missed it, as Eric dreams of Shelley's return, and the Crow gives Sarah the engagement ring Eric was going to give Shelley, and the climax was painful to get through, as was this movie, and I'll explain why in a rating. I'll give this movie a 3.9 out of 10. Don't get me wrong, what happened to Brandon Lee is a tragedy while filming the movie, but I don't like any of the characters, as the cinematography was pretty badly shot in this movie, and this plot was all over the fucking place, as the stunts are pretty bad in this movie. This is a stupid movie with a stupid plot that literally goes absolutely nowhere, and director Alex Proyas did a bad job at telling the story like he did with the movie I just recently reviewed called I, Robot, as I feel like this director is a hack, as this movie was made poorly, as this is poor popcorn. And I tried so hard to like this movie, but unfortunately I can't because of how much because people were saying it's a good movie, but it's not a good movie for me, as well as the tragedy of Brandon Lee. But at the end of the day, this is a non-recommendation for this movie, as this concept was pretty dumb, and I'm going to get some crap thrown at me. But I did try to like it, but unfortunately I can't at this point. Excuse me. And I will come back next time with The Crow, City of Angels. Thank you guys for joining me, and until then, fly like the crow.